I'm your host, Kinetic, and you're watching GameOnEnd. Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at the add-on All the Things. So let's get going. Okay, so the first time we open the game after installing All the Things, we're going to have two boxes popped up here. The first one is the mini list, which we'll explain in a minute. And then we have this bounty. This is mainly a thing for the developers. This is not needed. So the first thing to do is uncheck open automatically and then close this. Okay, and so now we have the mini list here. We can hover over it and see some of the options here. You can left click here to drag it around, move it around. You can right click it to open the settings menu, and then you can shift click if you would like to update your collections. Okay, on the mini map we have the map button. If you hover over that, you can also see the other options here. Right click will take you into the settings menu, left click will open the main list, and control left click will reopen this mini list if you close it. So you can see we have the mini list here, which we can move around, resize, and then we also have the left click to open the main list here, which we can also move around and resize. Okay, so we're going to get these both here, and then we're going to right click to open the settings. Okay, so if we open up the options here, we can see that there's a lot of options, but if we take this out to big picture, what All the Things is attempting to do is give us a easy kind of one window way to track whatever kind of things we would want to collect. So whether that's transmog or achievements or completing quests, any of those things, we can see that we have them all here. We have our mini list, which is reactive. Now this changes dynamically to whatever zone you're in, whether it's a dungeon or open world, and this will show you information pertinent to that area you're in. And then we have the main list, which shows you a complete overview of your account. Okay, so firstly here we have some general options, including whether the minimap button is visible, how that button looks, and then if we would like groups that have been fully completed to be visible or completed collections to be visible, and then whether you want headings to be visible for things that don't have something specific to them, but you still would like to just get everything done. You can also have a filter for your level. So some of these things like flight paths may not be available at a certain level. So if you check that out, then it won't offer for you to complete things that at your current level you can't complete. The next one here is Boe Items. Now this is a good one I recommend checking. All this does is hides out things that may be available in a specific dungeon but aren't particular to that dungeon. So a lot of like green Boe items or blue Boe items, they may be available as world drops as well as in that dungeon. So if you just want to see when you've got a dungeon completed, you don't want Boe items to be visible in that list because you can buy those off the auction house or you can get those out in open world stuff as well. This next one kind of tightens down on that as well, on whether you would like filters to be ignored. So this is just for Boe items, and primarily if you, say, are missing a cloth Boe chest, but the character you're on is a leatherware, then you may want to know if you don't know that appearance on one of your other characters so that you can still buy it off the auction house and send it to them. Or if you get it as a drop in a dungeon, it'll still tell you, hey, you don't know this appearance, so you can hang on to it and maybe don't vendor it off. We also have some other options here on whether to show you different difficulties when you enter into dungeons. And then you also can get a warning here when you do enter into a dungeon if you have completed everything from that difficulty. So say if you enter into an LFR raid, but you have everything that you can learn in there, then when you zone into that raid, it'll warn you and say, hey, do you maybe want to zone out and change to normal difficulty or heroic? Here is the option to report what you've collected in chat. So if you don't want to get a pop-up, but by default the game doesn't let you know when you've collected new appearances. So this is just preference if you would like to know when you get something new or not. And then the same here, you can have a report for completed quest chains. Here is the main option that you will need to decide. This is whether you want this by default to filter only things for your character, or if you would like things by default to show you for all of your characters. Checking this will bypass all of the filtering you've set up and just show you everything that you can get for any character on your account. The second most important feature here is the Completionist Mode. Now what this does is chooses whether on appearances it sees every version of an appearance as a separate item or not. So there are lots of items in the game that share appearances. So you may learn a pair of leather boots that drop from a dungeon, and that same appearance may be available on a BOE item. But if you've already learned it from that dungeon item, then you don't specifically need to learn it from that BOE item. There's no need for that. But if you do really want to have every technical appearance in the game, then you would want to learn that. So this is just to decide if all you care about is just having the look available to you, then you can uncheck this. And if you want to just learn everything, then you would check that. Now a second option becomes available when you uncheck this, and what this does is filters out things that may not be available to other classes. So in some cases, if you learn, say, a chest appearance from a tier set, now that would only be available to the class that that tier set is available for. But if there's also that same appearance that's available on a BOE item and another class could learn it, say if you learn a hunter chest piece that's a tier set, but that look is also available from a green BOE item, and that would let a shaman be able to use that appearance, then you can dictate if you still want that to show as incomplete here. Now at the bottom here is where we decide overall what we want to track. So if you don't care about some of these things, if you don't care about flight paths or followers or music rolls for your garrison, any of those things are available to uncheck here: selfie filters, titles, toys, and then whether you would like to track them account wide or not. So a lot of these things you just may not care. So flight paths, you don't need to know on this specific character if one of your other characters doesn't know a flight path or not. You'll find that out when you log into that character. Same thing with followers or champions, music rolls, so on and so forth. Now the recipes one is good because if you get a drop in a dungeon or a raid or in the world, it'll let you know that, hey, you can learn this recipe on your other character if they have that required profession. Okay, so we'll uncheck a couple of these things here, and then we'll switch over to some of these other options. Now here by default is filled out for your class only, so if this class can't even equip bows, then we're going to check that off. By default you shouldn't have to change anything here, but you can uncheck all and then only do what you care about, or you can just go with the class defaults. Now here is a good one. This will filter out seasonal items. If you're missing items from the Lunar Festival, but it's not the time for the Lunar Festival, then you don't want to see year-round that you're missing those items. So you may want to be able to filter those out. So it's only going to show you things that are currently available for whatever the time of year. Okay, and similarly here we have filtering out unobtainable items. This is a good one to check because for the most part, none of these things are available in the game anymore. You know, titles that you can no longer achieve or whatever. So if you don't want to see that you're missing a title that you can't get anyways, then this is a good thing to check. Okay, now we are looking at the interface options. These are things for whether they are added into tooltips or not. So we can look through here. These are all things that will or will not show when you hover over an item, say in your inventory. Okay, so we can hover over a recipe and we can see whether we know it or not. We can hover over an appearance and we can see whether we know that or not. Okay, here's a more specific option to show things that share an appearance. So if we hover over this, we'll see right there in the middle below the ATT, we'll see that this is a world drop, and both the Pioneer trousers and Vengeance leg guards both have this same appearance. So if you uncheck that, then it won't show that option there. So if you just want to see quickly, we can see the blue check mark to the right of both of those there, and we can see that we have collected the appearance from both of those items. But you would see in something else maybe if you haven't. And so we can see the reinforced linen cape there shows the blue circle. That means we have this appearance, but not from that specific item. So if all we care about is just having the appearance, then we've got it. But if we want to have all the appearances, then we need to learn this specific item because this is the one of those three that we're missing. Okay, and then lastly, we just have whether we want to see some of the locations that things are from, what creature it drops off of, whether it comes from a quest or not, and then also whether we want to show any class requirements or race requirements. Okay, then in the bottom right here we have some options for the scale for either the main list or the mini list. So if we would like to shrink that down a little bit. And then this also lets it limit how many sources that something can come from. So if we would just like to see the top 3 sources for something, now it'll also show an X showing, a count of other sources available, but they won't be visible. Okay, so now we have the features here. Now this has some options like being able to automatically skip cutscenes, and then which lists open by default when you start the game. It by default starts with just the mini list here, which is specific to the zone that you're in, and then the professions list, which we'll take a look at in a second, and then the auction house module. Now this is where you can change the settings for the sound that it makes when you learn a new appearance or complete an objective or achievement. You can choose whether it uses the master audio channel or not, and then you can just disable the celebration sound or not, and whether you get a warning when you unlearn an appearance. Like if you sell an item back to a vendor and it unlearns an appearance, you can get warned for that. And then lastly, just some information about the add-on. Okay, so now we'll take a look at the profession list. Now by default this is enabled. You can turn that off in those settings as we saw a second ago. What this does, the first time you open a profession, is it scans all known recipes and then gives you a list here of what you're missing from this profession and easily shows you where you can obtain that recipe from. So if we go in and look at this list here, we can see Coltiran patterns, which we can collapse down, Legion patterns, Draenor patterns, Pandaria, so on and so forth. So if we are missing things from basic tailoring, we can see what we're missing. So if we hover over any item here, it'll show us where we can obtain that recipe. By default, most of these are going to be from the trainer. It'll just say it is a profession recipe. But if we hover over something else, we can see that this one is available from a vendor in Winterspring. We can see that this one is available as a world drop from any classic content here. We can see that this one is available from a vendor in Silithus. So on and so forth. You can quickly just scan down through this, find things that are available from vendors. If they're a world drop, then you can watch the auction house for them. And then lastly, you have some options here. If there is, say, a vendor or something that you're trying to get things from, you can right click on them and that will pop out a mini list for that person. So you can see the things that you're trying to learn from that person. And then if you alt right click, it will plot some waypoints to that person. Another great feature of all the things, and this is something that I use actually most frequently, is that with any of these items, you can quickly see their source. So we can hover over this and see that this is a crafted item. We can hover over something else and see that it's a world drop. And with any of these items, you can see if it's available to purchase from a vendor, any of those kind of things. It's extremely helpful to me when I'm building out groups or adding things in Trade Skill Master. So to give an example, we're using the Boe item group that I have here. So the way I use this is if items are crafted, then I want to use different selling operations than I would if something is a world drop, because the only way to get these items is just random drops or, off the auction house or whatever. So if I get these items from running a dungeon or something, then I will add them to a group that's only for world drop items. And if I craft a new item, then I want to put that into a separate group for items that I have crafted through, in this case, tailoring or whatever. But the nice thing about that is that I can quickly see just by hovering over any item where that source is, so I don't have to figure it out. I know whether that's a world drop item or whether that's a crafted item, and I can quickly put that into the proper groups as I get them new. So every time I pick up new Boe items from a dungeon or raid, I open this up here and I hover over each of the ungrouped items and I find things that are world drops and quickly add them into this group. And now the nice thing about that is that that group specifically can have a minimum price that just looks at what it would sell to a vendor for. So maybe in a typical case, you may want to say, hey, my minimum price that I want to sell this on the auction house for is what I could get from the vendor for it, plus maybe say another 20 gold. that may be my lowest price because that covers how much it costs me to post it, and then I make a few extra gold. So you can quickly identify those items that are world drop items and put those into that group and not have to keep track of them as you're running through dungeons or raids throughout your day. And then crafted items, your minimum price may be how much it cost you to craft plus a certain profit. So you may do a minimum price of crafting plus 10 gold, or 110% of the crafting price, or whatever you want to do there. But the nice thing is that this lets you identify the source of those items immediately just by hovering over them. And same thing with a lot of these recipes and trade skill items. There are multiple things, especially in the cooking trade skill, that you can buy from a vendor. And if you go to the auction house and search for those cooking materials, there's plenty of people that are selling things that they're buying off of a vendor for 20 silver and then reselling for 2 or 3 gold a piece. I can now know when I do a shopping scan in the auction house, I can hover over each of those items before I buy them and see, oh wait, I'm not buying that one off the auction house because I can just go get that from a vendor. That, number one, saves me a ton of time for finding the source of the item, but it also saves me a ton of money because I'm not spending gold on things from the auction house at jacked up prices that I can literally just go to a vendor and buy. Okay, so for the last features, we're going to jump over to another character and take a look there. So we'll be right back. Okay, so we're on a new character that I leveled up here, and we've got the mini list. Okay, so we've got that placed down here where we'd like it. Now we can type /ATT to bring up the main list. Okay, so let's say we have some free time and are looking for something to do. We can look down here through some of the things that we're missing. So let's say we want to run some old dungeons or raids and start finishing out some sets. So we can quickly and easily click on dungeons and raids here, and we can look at classic dungeons or raids or Burning Crusade or any category here, but we can see, okay, Mist of Pandaria we're pretty low on. So let's take a look at what we're missing here. Okay, so some of the world boss appearances. So we could quickly jump out and just take a look, and we can say, oh, okay, we don't have much from this boss. So we can just fly out to this boss in Pandaria, but let's look for a dungeon or a raid. Okay, so we can take a look at Throne of Thunder here, and we can see that we don't have much done on normal or heroic, so let's go ahead and run out there. Okay, so as we're flying into the zone here, we'll see that the mini list dynamically updated to things that we can get done while we're in the zone, including things like fishing up pets, and a couple of zone drop things here, and some achievements. Okay, so those are all quick and easy things that, if you're in a zone and you're looking for something to do, you can right there see, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll fish for a little bit, or maybe I'll go complete a quest chain that I didn't get done here. Okay, so this is one of the vendors we were talking about earlier that does have some appearances that you can collect. So, there may be some raid drops that sell for a lot of gold that have these shared appearances. And so pretty frequently you can have things that if you were just looking for these appearances off of the auction house, you might spend hundreds or thousands of gold to get these appearances. But literally you come to a vendor here and you can see all of these shared appearances there by the blue check marks or the circled blue check marks. And we can see that simply by buying one of these items that we can learn those appearances and don't have to buy those overpriced items out of the auction house. Okay, so now that we're in the raid here, we can see that this has updated. We can see there's a quest in here that we can complete. And we see that there's a few different zone drop items that we can collect. And some pets. And then we are in the heroic version, so we can see here that there are some things that are common drops to multiple bosses. Then we can also see the list of each boss. So let's go ahead and drag this out so we can see more of it. And head in. Okay, so if we hover over the individual boss, we can see all of the possible items that he's got there. Okay, so we're in the heroic list. We can look over here at each item, and we can look at Jinrock here. Okay, and you can see something went away there, and if we look here, we got 2 items here. And so this is part of what was added in with those messages, which you can disable in the settings there. But we can see there the new item has been added to the appearance, which normally the game doesn't tell you that. So it's great that you can quickly see new things that you got there. And if you like, you can mark them as favorite. We can also see that we got part of a set here, and that's these bracers. Okay, so we're at Addon here. We've got a pet, a mount, and a couple of pieces of gear here. Alright, so we got a couple of items here. So we got these bracers and a set of shoulders. Okay, so I think that gives us the idea. It's just a great way to see how much of different dungeons or raids we've completed. And if you have that checkbox off for showing completed items, this one here, then these groups that are fully completed will go away. And so as you complete more of these dungeons and raids, this list will get smaller and smaller. It becomes a really nice way to just be able to quickly look at some things that you can knock off your list, or if you're looking for a quick way to get some extra transmog, you can find one of the places that you have the lowest % completed, and then just jump in there and cross your fingers, hope for the best, get some new transmog or pets or mounts or all of the above. So a nice quality of life add-on that can help you track down some of those missing transmog items, pets, mounts, toys, and to get some of those achievements completed while you got some downtime before Shadowlands, and some features that help out in other add-ons like Trade Skill Master and things like that. So I hope this helps you stay busy for the rest of the year till Shadowlands comes out, and hope to see you in the next one. That will do it for this episode. If you've enjoyed this, remember, pressing the like button is absolutely free. Subscribe and stay tuned for more Game on End.